The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode are that of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the values of sponsors or other associated organizations. Welcome to the Parental Compass. I am your host, Bobby Williams. Episode 23. You know, I feel like we're starting to really get a good catalog of material here. And you can find every episode by going to parentalcompass.org, or you can subscribe to us on Apple Music and Spotify. That way you'll get notified every week when we drop a new episode. I, of course, want to give a big shout out to Family Education and Support Services. They are creating this whole project, so shout out to FES, Brain Development. You know, your brain, it's like a plant. If you give it the right nutrients, the right environment, the right care, it's going to grow and develop properly. So think about how important that is when you're a child and your brain is developing the most. Here to discuss the issue with me is Chris Moon. Chris is a professor of early learning and education at South Puget Sound Community College. Basically what Chris does is she educates the educators. So let's let her educate us. So how does nutrition relate to brain development, or what's the connection there?
Well, great question. We are literally what you eat. You know, you've probably heard that from your parents or somewhere along the line. But what we put into our body impacts how our brain operates. So if we aren't feeding it the correct amounts of fats and vegetables and fiber, then it's not going to develop in the most optimal way. So when we're developing as children, just laying down the basics of your brain, your neurons, it really needs proper nutrients to get that established, right? And then as we continue to grow on into adulthood, we still continue to need proper nutrition just so that our cells can stay healthy. And our brain cells are super important because that controls every other aspect of our body. So yeah, really important to keep it healthy.
Well, if there's one thing that kids love, it's eating kale and healthy greens.
Of course.
You know? Yeah. Or, I mean, they just want to eat like fish sticks and stuff. So how are you going to convince them to eat this healthy food when it's not typically their instinct,
It is not their instinct. And there's some evidence that what moms eat when they're pregnant influences kids' taste as they come out and into the world. So that's a place to start, is that once somebody becomes pregnant, is to start thinking about what they're eating, to start developing healthier tastes, because really you develop those tastes over time, right? So I don't know if you've ever changed your eating where you go from, white bread to whole wheat bread. Well, after a while, whole wheat bread tastes better and white bread doesn't even taste that great. But in the beginning, it just tastes horrible. So it's kind of acclimating to better tastes. So using things like ranch dip with your carrots, or what do kids like? That's often with the vegetables. Some cheese on your broccoli. So some way that gives you a taste that you really like, and pairing it with the thing that maybe you don't like. And eventually you'll grow to like both tastes probably. I am also a fan of hiding vegetables and things. I still do it. So I made meatloaf the other night and I put in carrots and kale and broccoli, just chop stuff up and you stick it in. You just kids don't even notice. I always put kale in my spaghetti sauce, and my kids were like the other night, I just always has green stuff in the spaghetti. Why is that weird? Because their friends were over, and I was like, well, it's because I've always put kale in your spaghetti sauce and you never notice, right? So
yeah, you just got to kind of sneak it in there. Oftentimes, it seems like a lot of kids are getting diagnosed with ADD. And we've talked before about how maybe sometimes what looks like ADD could just be poor nutrition or something. I mean, explain that idea to me.
Yeah, so I want to first say, of course, there is actual ADD and ADHD that
Hmm.
is a chemical imbalance in the brain, and the brain actually looks different under scans. But uh, one of the researchers I follow, he talks about it's often overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed at the same time. So some kids who have true ADHD is often underdiagnosed. They don't catch it, but often we overdiagnose it because it is other things. So sleep deprivation can look a lot like ADHD because your brain is tired. And so it's trying to wake you up. And so you get wiggly and you need, in your seat, you're standing up because you're tired and your brain is trying to tell your body, wake up, move around. And so that absolutely sleep deprivation can look like that, but also nutrition, because if you're getting kind of these constant highs from sugar overload, so if you eat high, which often kids do, high carb, high sugar diets, then they
Hmm.
have these spikes, right? So spike of energy where it looks like really crazy because their body is just vibrating almost, right? So they have to move all the time and they can't sit and just kind of think about what they're doing.
Hmm. This also makes me think about hydration, or they say you're supposed to get 8 glasses of water a day or something, but that almost seems ridiculous. Like, does anyone really get that much water, or what can
There
you do
probably are
there?
some people, and I try to do this and I have a hard time, even though I know how important it is, but you're right. I think there's even I'm not going to remember the exact formula, but there's a formula for your weight, body weight, and drinking
Mhm.
a certain
Yeah,
percentage
like
of your,
half your body weight in
yeah, something
ounces
like
or
that. Yeah.
something.
So
Yeah.
for a kid, it would be less. But for an adult, it would be more, closer to
Mhm.
8. So most average adult would be
But
about
so
8.
how can you get the kids to get in the habit of that? Or
Yeah, so, this was something I knew about going in with my kids. So we just only gave them water. Like they didn't have a
Mhm.
choice. So they just, when they were thirsty or was just out all the time in their sippy cups, or, we just never did juice at all. And so it wasn't until my kids were old, they'll say to me, like, we never got juice. We didn't even know about apple juice. What? It's such a great
Uh-huh.
thing. I'm like, it is a great thing, but it's really just pure sugar. So there's no nutritional value in that. Why would I want to give that to my kids when I know that water is so important, because our bodies are mostly water, right? In our brains. So yeah, so I think if kids are already drinking other things, again, it's that like slow back off thing where you start flavoring their drink with water until pretty soon it's water with flavored drink in it. So adding a
Just
splash of
water down the
something.
juice.
Yeah. So, and if kids really, I mean, there are some kids that really just don't like water. So finding healthier juices, like a pomegranate juice, is actually a really good juice because it provides some other nutrients. And so a splash of pomegranate juice and some water can make it taste good, and kids think they're getting juice, but it's actually a healthier option.
Juice is such a trick because you grow up just thinking juice is like good for you, just as good as eating an apple or something, and then it just turns out it's all sugar.
Yeah,
Everything keeps changing, at least
right.
nutrition wise, of what's good, what's not.
Absolutely. And they used to say, I mean, in the school districts lunches, they would say, apple juice counted as the fruit. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of misinformation being presented, because we know apple juice is just all the squeezed out sugar, and the apple gives you fiber and all these other micronutrients. So,
Yeah. Well, it also makes me think of exercise, or talking about how we're in a different world now. When I was young, my parents would just sort of open the door and it's like explore the neighborhood, run around, do whatever.
right.
And now the world is a different place. You may not trust your neighborhood. You might live in an apartment complex. So, how can parents help to keep their children active in this world that we're living in? It seems more challenging.
Yeah, I agree. And, that makes me really sad. I also was of the generation of you go outside and when the street lights come on, you come in.
Yeah.
uh yeah, that, and so it's really being creative and finding places where kids can get large body movements. They just absolutely have to have exercise because that provides blood and oxygen to your brain, which is what it needs to function, right? So we just
Mhm.
have to get movement in our day. It doesn't have to be exercise, just has to be movement. So finding a space, if you're feeling landlocked in your house, finding places in your house that you can move, putting out an old, I know when it would rain, we had like a little slide that we put in the living room where the little kids could just climb up and slide down in the slide, or putting them like a mattress or a futon or something on the ground and letting them jump around on that. So you're not, you have to be careful. Like, this is the jumping place, not beds are for jumping, because often that's not a safe environment to jump. But finding, just so being creative, finding times. It's important for adults to get out, and it's also important for adults to get into nature. So making field trips with your kids a priority, where you're all going to go out to this park. We have so many beautiful places to go in Olympia. There's just no shortage of that, right? We have so many.
Yeah. Well, so what's the value? We're talking about brain development, and there's learning through a tablet, and then there's going out and being in nature. I assume the nature one is better, but why is that?
Well, if you think about what parts of your sensory system are being used when you look at a tablet, it's pretty much visual, right? Maybe there's a little motor if you're tapping things or something.
Yeah.
But you go out in nature, if you take a walk in the woods, it's like a full sensory bath, right? You're using every one of your senses is activated. And so think about if you look at a brain scan, right, it lights up where the parts are being used, where the nutrients that we just talked about are being utilized. That means your brain is lighting up in those areas because it's using those different parts of the brain. So when you're looking at a tablet, you got the auditory cortex in the back of your head. That's lighting up because you're a visual. But you go outside and all of a sudden you got auditory, sensory, and smell, and visual, and skin touch. Just, it's like the whole thing is lit up. So your brain would just light up so much. And there's lots of research talking about how that just allows your brain to calm down. And like, if you want a stress reliever, go take a little walk out in the woods. It's just incredible.
Yeah, that is interesting that it's like you're practicing balance, you're practicing all these visual things, and so much more is happening.
Yeah.
I remember when we've talked before, you've mentioned unstructured play being a good thing. Like, you can load your kids up with a bunch of soccer teams or something, but unstructured play is important too. What is unstructured play, and why does it matter?
Well, so just going back to the building blocks of the brain, which is that we want to build these pathways in our brain based on experiences. So the more experiences you have around a certain area, then those are the pathways that are going to get built. So really what we want is a lot of pathways built between our limbic system, our emotional system, and then our thinking system. So our prefrontal cortex, where we plan and engage and be creative and problem solve, have flexible thinking. So those are the pathways we want to create. So when we're doing unstructured play, we can practice all of those things. We can repeat experiences in those ways so that those are the pathways that get strengthened. So if you think about, if I'm out in the backyard and I'm playing in my sandbox and I, have to figure out I want to put water. Well, how am I going to get water in my sandbox? Well, I have lots of options. I can go drag the hose over. I can take the bucket to the faucet. I can go inside. So I have to think about all these different ways that I can get water to my project. And then I have to think about, how can the water stay in the sandbox in the way that I want it to? Do I bury the bucket? Do I make a trough or something? Do I have to put something down because it keeps sinking into the sand? So think about all of those problems that I'm having to solve just on my own. Nobody's telling me this is how you put sand and water together to make it work, right? Like they would if I was playing soccer or something. And those are great skills to get, but they're telling me, this is the way this game works. These are the rules. So I have no way to creatively add on to what I already know in my brain and think about new ways of doing things. So all of that, and learn about my world, right? I'm learning about how sand and water mix. What a great physics experiment.
Yeah. Well, you were talking too about nature and being able to help create a state of calm. And in the world that we're in, there's so many pressures. It's always just go, go, go. How can we raise children so that they grow up with a sense of inner peace? That just seems one of the most difficult things to achieve in the world right now.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to go back to the pathways in your brain, because What stress does and all this kind of go, go, go is activate our lower regions of the brain, which are those fight, flight, or freeze areas. And so the more we live in stress, the more those pathways between the middle emotional brain and sensory brain and the lower brain of fight, fright, or flee, we got to figure out what are we going to do and how do I protect myself? And what we want is, again, sort of that calm down brain where we're engaging those pathways up to the frontal lobe of where we're thinking and planning and being creative. And we can't do that under stress. So we need to teach kids how to calm their brain, calm their bodies, find ways. Like I said, this book is a great, how many different ways do you do for fun, like in ways that are pleasurable or fun?
So explain that book to me you got there.
Yeah. So this is B is for breathe. And it's ABC's coping with different strategies if you have strong emotions. So it's finding ways, again, to kind of calm the brain down so that we can access the prefrontal cortex, which gives us the ability to problem solve or moderate our emotions or have impulse control.
What are some good just practices you can get? You can tell your child's getting anxious. What do you tell them to do?
Breathing is number one. So there's lots of different strategies for breathing, pretending you're blowing up a balloon, holding onto your belly and feeling it rise and lower. But breath really helps because, again, it's getting oxygen into your brain and your body, and it helps to relax that. So breathing is a great strategy. Walking, getting outside nature, anything that gives you kind of that sensory bath and sense of calm. So it's different for different people because some people love to be outside. For somebody else, it might be reading a book, right?
Yeah.
Or sitting quietly or breathing. But, we're doing a lot of social emotional learning in schools now, teaching kids these skills because we see how important it is to learning. And they have just all kinds of strategies around breathing or walking calmly or talking to a friend or, just different ways to center yourself really is what it is, right?
Another major challenge is just getting enough sleep in this go, go, go world we're in. How can we get children just to calm down, go to bed when it's time to go to bed? I'd say that's one of the top challenges for a lot of parents out there.
I agree. And a lot of it's because we go, go, go until the parent is ready for bed, which might not be until 9 or 10 at night, right? But the adult needs a lot less sleep than the kid. And so it's recognizing the cues of the kid of when they're tired. Again, it goes back to what we were just talking about, getting that centered is helping kids to have calm. So not watching TV up until it's bedtime, because that's an activating activity. So it's reading books in the evening instead of watching TV. Having a good dinner, right, with proper nutrition and good water, all of those things will help a kid sleep better. Getting any kind of media out of their room, because again, those are stimulating things and we want to create a sleep environment that's calming. And then watching for those. So what happens in the brain is your brain is ready to sleep. The cortisol goes down and melatonin goes up. And so there's kind of this sweet spot that says, I'm ready to sleep. And what happens is if parents miss that spot for their kid, which sometimes could be 6:30 at night, right? Or 7, the kids will say, the brain of the kid will say, I need to stay up, send more cortisol. So the stress hormone gets pumped into the brain and the body. And all of a sudden it's the second wind. We've all experienced this, right? And all of a sudden you're like, I'm not tired at all. I can't even fall asleep. So you're laying in bed and you're like, I can't sleep. Yeah. So it's finding that sweet spot. It's making the evening a calm time so you can watch their cues. It's hard. I mean, if you look at the sleep charts, I pulled it up, like a infant 4 to 11 months needs 12 to 15 hours. So that's a lot of the day, right? That's including naps, of course. A 3 to 5-year-old's 10 to 13 hours. So if you're getting them up at 6 in the morning, you kind of got to work backwards to go to childcare or something, then, 10 hours earlier than that is 8 o'clock at night. So just making sure, and some kids need more sleep and others don't need as much. So recognizing that for your kid is important.
Well, Chris, this has all been super informative, super helpful, and just thank you so much for taking the time to be here and talk today.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you so much, Chris. All these ideas, they may seem a lot, But if you can just implement 1 or 2 of them into your day-to-day routine, that's going to make a huge difference. It doesn't have to be huge. Little things make a big difference. So that's our show today. On behalf of Family Education and Support Services and myself, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week on the Parental Compass. Peace!